History books dedicate entire chapters to the sinking of the Titanic and the Lusitania. Yet another massive ocean liner met its end in exactly the same era, under equally terrifying circumstances, almost entirely erased from our collective memory. When you look at the raw numbers, the loss of life among paying passengers on this forgotten ship actually exceeded the passenger death toll of the Titanic. This is the Empress of Ireland. Built in 1906, she was a marvel of Edwardian engineering. With watertight compartments and state-of-the-art bulkheads, the maritime world widely considered her unsinkable. On the evening of May 29, 1914, she carried 1,477 crew and passengers. They were businessmen, immigrants, and families, settling in for what was supposed to be a quiet trip down the St. Lawrence River. It was an unusually warm spring night. To cool off their cramped quarters, dozens of passengers made a simple, everyday decision. They unlatched and opened the brass portholes in their cabins to catch the river breeze. This small desire for comfort created a series of openings just inches above the waterline, a vulnerability that would remain hidden until the ship was no longer upright. As the Empress moved steadily down the river, a thick bank of fog suddenly rolled in. Within minutes, visibility dropped to absolute zero. The crew was sailing completely blind. Somewhere in that same dense mist was the Storstad. She was a Norwegian collier heavily laden with coal, built with a reinforced solid steel bow designed to crush through sea ice. Knowing they were in the same area, they began blasting steam whistles to signal their positions. But dense fog distorts sound waves. The echoes bouncing off the water led both captains to severely misjudge where the other vessel actually was. Relying entirely on these distorted acoustic illusions, both crews initiated maneuvers they thought would safely widen the gap between them. Instead, they steered their massive steel hulls directly onto a collision course. At 1:55 a.m., the sharp prow of the Storstad emerged from the fog. It was moving too fast to stop, driving straight into the starboard side of the Empress of Ireland. The impact tore a 14-foot hole straight through the ship's steel plating. The severe damage on the Storstad's crumpled bow reveals the immense kinetic force of a heavy coal ship striking at full speed. The massive gash perfectly aligned with the Empress's engine room. Millions of gallons of cold river water rushed into the ship's deepest compartments under immense pressure. It took exactly 2 minutes for the rising water to drown the boiler fires. The engines died. The lights flickered and failed. The massive vessel was completely paralyzed in the dark. Because the water was rushing in strictly on the starboard side, the ship began to list heavily, tilting dangerously to the right as the massive weight pulled it down. This sharp tilt created the lethal tipping point. As the ship leaned over, the passenger decks, where hundreds of portholes had been left wide open, were pushed entirely below the river's surface. The ship's internal watertight bulkheads were suddenly useless. Those open portholes acted as intake valves, pouring an unrelenting torrent of water directly into the upper decks and aggressively multiplying the angle of the list. The initial collision caused severe damage, but the ship was designed to survive it. It was the cascading failure caused by the open portholes that bypassed her defenses and triggered a uniquely rapid collapse. Deep inside the ship, sleeping passengers woke in pitch blackness to find their beds standing on end. The floor was tilted at a staggering 45 degrees, and freezing water was already pouring through the hallways. The extreme angle immediately neutralized the ship's primary safety protocols. The crew physically could not swing the heavy wooden lifeboats out on the high side of the ship, leaving half the safety capacity hanging completely out of reach. Inside, gravity weaponized the elegant architecture. Staircases became vertical cliffs. Heavy furniture broke loose and crushed people against the bulkheads. As the ship rolled further onto its side, hundreds of passengers found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of dead ends. In a disaster moving at this speed, emergency training meant nothing. Whether a passenger survived or drowned was dictated almost entirely by the random location of their cabin and their proximity to an open deck. At 2:09 a.m., exactly 14 minutes after the collision, the Empress of Ireland rolled completely over and vanished beneath the surface. 1,012 people died, many succumbing to the freezing 40-degree water before rescue boats could arrive. The public was outraged, leading to a highly publicized marine inquiry in 1914. During the bitter proceedings, both surviving captains pointed the finger at one another, each swearing the other ship had wildly altered its course. The official investigation ultimately concluded there was no single act of malice. They distributed the fault among the blinding fog, the crew's mutual misreading of the whistle blasts, and the passengers' fatal choice to open their windows. The inquiry revealed how the disaster relied on a specific sequence of failures: a warm evening, a fog bank, and distorted sound waves. When these minor, unconnected variables aligned, they bypassed every safety measure designed to keep the Empress afloat. Today, the Empress of Ireland rests quietly on her side, just 130 feet deep in the St. Lawrence River. As you can see on the wreck, the open portholes that doomed the ship still stare out into the murky water. Despite the staggering loss of life, the disaster barely had time to register in public consciousness. Less than 2 months later, the First World War broke out in Europe, dominating the front pages and burying the story of the Empress for over a century. It took only 14 minutes for thousands of tons of steel to fail, extinguishing over 1,000 human lives in a matter of seconds. Sitting quietly in the river mud, the Empress remains a permanent physical reminder of how quickly nature can exploit a single oversight, proving once again that human engineering has hard limits.